Have you ever felt as if the world is constantly trying to break you? As if people, situations, and even your own thoughts are always ready to hurt, judge, or limit who you truly are? In this video, we'll embark on a deep journey of healing and inner reconnection, guided by the revolutionary ideas of Carl Gustav Jung. Nobody and nothing will ever hurt you again. That statement sounds bold, perhaps even impossible. But what if its promise doesn't depend on the world outside changing, but on a silent, powerful transformation within you? The pains, traumas, and emotional wounds we carry often do not come from the present moment, but from forgotten parts of ourselves that continue crying out for attention. There is a path of healing that does not demand perfection, only the courage to see yourself as a whole. When that happens, what comes from outside no longer has the power to harm you. If this message resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose to heal and be whole." The idea that nobody and nothing will ever hurt us again does not arise from denying reality, but from deepening our awareness. Carl Jung taught us that most of our suffering does not stem directly from external events, but from the way those events activate unconscious, unintegrated parts within us. When we project our inner wounds onto the world, everything that happens to us feels threatening. That process is called projection, a psychic defense in which we attribute to others what we cannot recognize in ourselves. Jung also spoke of the shadow, the rejected part of our being that, when ignored, tends to manifest destructively. Integrating the shadow is the beginning of true liberation. When we welcome what has been repressed and face our pains, traumas, and undesirable feelings head-on, we stop being prisoners of what is outside. Another essential concept is individuation, the process of becoming who we really are. This involves a courageous journey towards self-knowledge, where we learn to unite what is separated within us, such as reason and emotion, light and shadow, anima and animus, our inner feminine and masculine aspects. When these polarities integrate, a new psychic stability is born. With that stability, an inner center so solid emerges that external forces lose their power to destabilize us. Pain then stops feeling like an attack and becomes a signal, an invitation to go deeper. It is in that dive that we discover nobody and nothing will ever hurt us again, because we are no longer at the mercy of ourselves. Emotional pain rarely originates directly from another person's actions or inactions. What really hurts is not the act itself, but the way it touches an old wound, often forgotten or repressed. Jung was clear when he said that what affects us most in another person reveals more about ourselves than about them. From this insight, we can begin to understand why we keep hurting ourselves over and over through our relationships and experiences. The personal unconscious carries not only repressed memories, but also complexes, emotional cores charged with energy that form in childhood and remain active in adult life. When someone rejects, betrays, or criticizes us, that event can activate an old complex, perhaps rooted in an absent or critical parental figure. What hurts is not the current rejection, but the old wound it reopens. This is the principle behind projection, an unconscious attempt to place outside what we cannot face within. By projecting our insecurities, fears, and resentments onto others, we perpetuate a cycle of pain. This mechanism is especially evident in intimate relationships. We fall in love not only with who the other person is, but also with what they represent in our psychic world. In many cases, our partner embodies a part of our shadow, or even an archetypal figure, such as the internalized father or mother. When that reflection distorts, frustration and pain set in. In reality, we are wrestling with parts of ourselves that remain unhealed. The key to breaking this cycle is becoming aware of our projections. Jung said we can only free ourselves from what unconsciously governs us when we make it conscious. That requires courage, the courage to look within and ask not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "Why is this affecting me so deeply?" This shift moves the focus from the external to the internal. Pain ceases to be a punishment from the world and becomes a mirror of the soul. It is natural to resist such deep introspection. We tend to blame others or expect the world to change before our pain can disappear. Yet as long as we fail to recognize that external triggers merely activate internal content, we remain vulnerable to others' actions. True emotional freedom begins when we understand that nobody truly hurts us. We are the ones who unconsciously place ourselves in situations where old patterns repeat. Behind every pain, there is a message. The criticism that knocks us down may reveal an ideal of perfection we still carry. The abandonment that consumes us may expose the inner child who never felt welcomed. As we learn to decipher these messages, pain transforms into a guide. At that point, we are no longer being hurt. We are being called to awareness. Jung's path was never about avoiding pain, but about understanding and transcending it. Emotional pain need not be a prison. It can be the gateway to self-healing. To walk this path, we must stop running from the mirrors the world holds up to us. Every person who bothers us, every situation that destabilizes us, points us inward. When we accept this inner invitation, we discover something powerful. Nobody and nothing will ever hurt us again, because the power to hurt was from the beginning inside us. A wound remains open only while we refuse to face it. Once we look at it with presence, listening and compassion, it begins to close, not by forgetting but by integrating. The past ceases to dominate the present. In this new state, the world becomes a landscape of learning rather than a battlefield, and nobody else has the power to define how we feel. Much human suffering arises from the constant attempt to deny who we are. From an early age, we learn to hide traits that society deems unwelcome: anger, envy, vulnerability, ambition, sensuality. These aspects do not vanish when repressed. They sink into the unconscious and form what Jung called the shadow. The shadow consists of everything we refuse to be, but nonetheless are. The more we deny it, the stronger it becomes, and the more it manifests unconsciously, often in self-destructive ways. The shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply what was rejected, forgotten, or ignored because it did not fit expectations or conflicted with our idealized self-image. Problems arise when these rejected parts express themselves without our awareness, through disproportionate emotional outbursts, self-sabotaging behaviors, or even psychosomatic illnesses. The pain we feel often results from the clash between the ego, which strives for control, and the shadow, which cries out for recognition. That is why Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Many experiences that wound us deeply are not caused by random external forces, but by internal forces at war within. The enemy we project onto parents, partners, bosses, or friends is actually a reflection of our inner enemy, the part of ourselves we ignore but that remains alive and active. When we fail to integrate our shadow, it seeks expression by other means. We might feel anger at an authoritarian figure, when in truth we are repressing our own impulse to lead. We might judge someone for being seductive, when we do not recognize in ourselves the desire to be seen and desired. The shadow operates silently, distorting our perception of others and fueling conflicts that ultimately spring from internal tensions. Healing does not come from eliminating the shadow, but from integrating it. To integrate means recognizing that we are ambiguous, imperfect, and multiple. It means bringing light to what is hidden and welcoming what was rejected. This work requires humility and courage. It is easier to believe that others are the problem. Yet until we undertake this inner work, we will continue to be wounded by the same triggers and fall into the same emotional traps. As we begin to relate consciously to the shadow, something changes. We realize that what seemed to hurt us was actually trying to teach us. Anger can reveal a boundary that was violated. Jealousy can expose an old insecurity. Sadness can remind us of a desire never fulfilled. The shadow contains hidden treasures, vital energy, creativity, authenticity. By reintegrating these contents, we reclaim parts of ourselves that were lost. This process does not happen overnight. It is a lifelong practice of self-observation, responsibility, and compassion. But with each step, we become less vulnerable to the outside world. By recognizing our inner enemy, it ceases to be an enemy and becomes an ally, a guide, a bridge to a more whole version of ourselves. When someone hurts us, the pain strikes the part we have yet to heal. The ignored shadow becomes an open wound, sensitive and reactive. But the integrated shadow becomes invisible armor, not one that hardens, but one that welcomes. In that state of integration, we discover something revolutionary. We no longer need to defend ourselves from the world, because we have stopped attacking ourselves from within. That is why nobody and nothing will ever hurt you in the same way again, not because the world grew gentler, but because you stopped seeing it through eyes of rejection. You now see with eyes of awareness. For Jung, the path of healing was not only about ending suffering, but about becoming fully who you are. He called this process individuation, the journey toward the psychic center of the self, a place of balance and authenticity where you stop living for external expectations and begin acting from your essential truth. At that point, pain ceases to govern you. When you approach this center, nothing and no one can wound you as before, because you are no longer fragmented, scattered, or disconnected from yourself. Individuation is not selfish, but a profound commitment to your essence. It involves unlearning inherited values, confronting old fears, and acknowledging what was neglected or suppressed. Throughout life, we shape ourselves to be accepted by family, society, and our communities. In the process, whole parts of our being are set aside. Individuation is the return journey, not to who we were before, but to who we have always been behind all the masks. This journey demands a dive into the unconscious, which Jung saw not just as a storehouse of repressed contents, but as a living system rich in wisdom that constantly sends us signals through dreams, impulses, symptoms, and repetitions. Individuation occurs when the ego, instead of resisting, begins a dialogue with the unconscious. In that dialogue, the ego stops being the sole decision-maker and cooperates with the self, the central archetype of psychic wholeness. The self guides the journey, offering direction and meaning. Along the way, we identify less with roles, titles, appearances, and superficial narratives. We free ourselves from needing external approval because we feel more clearly the value within. When that connection is established, others' opinions no longer define our self-esteem. Criticism no longer dismantles us, and praise no longer deludes us. We find stability, not because our surroundings are calm, but because we cultivate an inner center that is silent, wise, and firm. That center shields us from collapse when life becomes turbulent. It does not prevent us from feeling, but it prevents us from being destroyed by feeling. Individuation also invites us to accept our totality: light and shadow, reason and intuition, strength and vulnerability. It is not about perfection, but wholeness. Every part of us has a role, a function, a place. Where there is internal rejection, there is conflict. Where there is integration, there is peace. From that peace arises a discreet yet unbreakable strength, one that does not need to assert itself because it rests on truth. Anyone who lives from truth no longer fears others' falsehoods. Many embark on this path after great loss, existential crisis, or emotional collapse. Pain, when truly understood, can open the door to transformation. When everything seems to fall apart, the weakened ego finally makes room for something deeper to emerge. That is when individuation truly begins. It is neither quick nor linear. It is a lifetime journey of highs and lows, discoveries and relapses. Yet every step toward the self is a step toward freedom. To individuate is to become indivisible within, to align action and essence, desire and duty, love and truth. By doing so, we grow less vulnerable to external chaos. That does not mean we will never suffer again, but that suffering will no longer have the power to break us. It may touch us, but it will not destroy us. It may challenge us, but it will not derail us. Here the affirmation reveals its deepest truth. Nobody and nothing will ever hurt you the same way again, because now you have a center, and no matter how intense what happens around you may be, it will never outweigh what stands firm and awake within you. One of the deepest pillars of Jungian psychology is the recognition that each person carries both masculine and feminine aspects, regardless of biological sex. Jung called these internal polarities anima, the feminine in a man's psyche, and animus, the masculine in a woman's. Integrating these opposing forces, often in conflict or projected onto others, is a fundamental step in individuation and one of the most powerful ways to build an inner center, resilient enough to withstand external pain. When anima and animus remain unrecognized, we project their qualities onto others, especially in romantic relationships. That is why so many partnerships become stages for emotional dependency, idealization, and frustration. We look outside for what is missing within, expecting someone else to embody our lost side. Disappointment is inevitable because no one can sustain the projection of a part of our soul. When those projections shatter, the pain feels unbearable, not only because we lose someone, but because unconsciously we feel we have lost a part of ourselves. Integration of these polarities begins with recognition. The internal feminine, anima, symbolizes intuition, feeling, receptivity, connection with the unconscious, deep creativity, and the capacity to surrender. The internal masculine, animus, relates to reason, action, logic, structure, initiative, and direction. It is not about reinforcing gender stereotypes, but understanding that these forces exist in all of us, and that their internal harmony is essential for psychic balance. When we repress or overvalue one aspect, we create an internal split. Men who reject their internal feminine may suffocate sensitivity, becoming overly rational or emotionally disconnected. Women who repress their internal masculine may struggle to assert themselves, to act decisively, or to express autonomy. That lack of integration leaves gaps filled by unbalanced relationships, where we seek in others what we do not find within. Healing begins when we stop projecting and start integrating. We listen to intuition without abandoning logic, act decisively without crushing sensitivity, allow ourselves to feel deeply without losing clarity. Balance does not eliminate pain, but provides an inner framework to handle it. When the internal feminine is integrated, we know how to welcome pain, feel it, and understand it. When the internal masculine is integrated, we know how to transform that pain into conscious action and movement toward healing. One side listens, the other decides. Together, they create a complete human being. This internal harmony shows up externally in healthier relationships, since we no longer expect someone else to complete us. We see others as fellow travelers, not saviors or enemies. Emotional maturity blossoms, bringing a deep psychic stability that shields us from external shocks. What once wounded us easily, a rejection, a criticism, an abandonment, no longer finds fertile ground because there is no void waiting to be filled. Integration of masculine and feminine also strengthens identity. We become more whole, less fragmented. When both principles live within us, we feel capable of handling any situation, welcoming what hurts, deciding what to do, forging new paths. That emotional autonomy is one of the purest forms of freedom, and that freedom protects us. A whole person does not break under the world's touch. Someone who recognizes their totality does not depend on others' approval to know who they are. That is why integrating anima and animus reveals a silent yet firm strength, one that is present without aggression. Even in the hardest moments, it tells us, nobody and nothing can hurt me as before, because now I am whole. Our journey here is not merely intellectual but existential. We learn that pain from outside only gains ground when something inside remains open, at war, waiting to be seen. Jung taught that what we fail to integrate turns against us, that the shadow must be welcomed, and that individuation is the only true path to freedom. When we become whole, imperfect but whole, the world no longer wields the same power over us. Nobody and nothing will ever hurt you the same way again. Not because the world changed, but because you changed. You became aware, you became presence, you became your own home. If this message spoke to your soul, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs to remember their inner power. Before you go, watch the video on your screen. It delves even deeper into this journey of self-knowledge and healing. Remember, true protection does not come from isolation, but from awareness. The more conscious you become, the more untouchable you are.